The Imperial Colosseum loomed above Captain Darius Kane like a monstrous, metallic beast, its towering walls pulsing with golden energy lines. The crowd's roar surged through the colossal arena, a symphony of alien voices chanting in rhythmic unison. Thousands of beings from across the Empire filled the stands, their eyes locked on the lone figure standing in the center of the vast battlefield. Darius adjusted the straps on his tactical vest, feeling the weight of the combat knife secured at his hip. He exhaled slowly, his gaze sweeping over the towering statues of Zytherian warlords that lined the perimeter, their stone-carved sneers a silent reminder of the Empire's pride. A voice crackled through his earpiece, translating the Emperor's booming announcement. "Behold, citizens of the Empire! The Terran champion stands before us." The Emperor's voice echoed, laced with disdain. A frail creature from a backward world, daring to face the finest warriors of Zytherian blood. Let this be a lesson in superiority! Laughter erupted from the grandstands, a cacophony of mocking clicks and guttural growls. Darius smirked, rolling his shoulders. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, but fear had no place here. The moment he accepted this challenge, he had embraced the odds, no matter how overwhelming they seemed. A sharp hiss filled the air as the gates at the far end of the arena slid open. 4 figures emerged, each towering over Darius by at least 2 feet. Their armor gleamed under the arena lights, polished obsidian plates etched with glowing crimson veins. The lead warrior, his face hidden behind a skull-like visor, stomped forward and sneered. "You should have stayed in your little mud world, human," the alien growled, his voice carrying through the arena's amplifiers. "We'll send you back in pieces." Darius chuckled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Big words. Hope your fighting skills match your mouth." The alien's eyes narrowed. The crowd quieted, anticipation thick in the air. Darius shifted his stance, analyzing their movements, every twitch of muscle, the weight of their steps. He knew brute force wouldn't win this fight. He needed speed, precision, and the one thing humanity had mastered over millennia, adaptability. The Emperor's voice thundered once more. "Begin!" The first Zytherian lunged, a blur of muscle and steel, his massive blade swinging down with crushing force. Darius sidestepped, the blade carving into the arena floor with a metallic screech. Using the opening, he darted inside the alien's guard, driving an elbow into the soft joint between armor plates. The warrior stumbled, surprised by the speed and efficiency of the counter. The second attacker came in fast, aiming a gauntlet fist at Darius' ribs. He twisted, feeling the fist graze past, and drove his knee into the alien's gut. The Zytherian barely flinched, but it bought him space. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Darius could hear the confusion rippling through them. He wasn't fighting like they expected, a wild, desperate scramble. He was methodical, precise, and relentless. "Is that all you got?" Darius taunted, circling them with calculated footwork. "I expected more from the Emperor's best." The lead warrior snarled and charged again, this time feinting left before spinning with a backhand strike. Darius ducked, feeling the wind of the strike pass over his head. In a fluid motion, he drew his combat knife and slashed at the alien's exposed thigh. The blade sliced through the weak joint, and the warrior howled in pain. Blood splattered onto the sand, dark and viscous. The crowd gasped, the jeers replaced by stunned silence. "You fight like a predator," the wounded warrior spat, clutching his leg. "But you will fall." Darius wiped his blade against his sleeve, his heart pounding in rhythm with the moment. "Predators adapt," he said coolly. The remaining warriors regrouped, their arrogance shaken. They advanced together, a calculated formation meant to overwhelm him. Darius crouched slightly, his mind racing through scenarios. He had trained for this, against superior numbers, superior strength. All it took was patience. One rushed in low while another aimed high. Darius leapt, kicking off the charging warrior's head and flipping behind them. Before they could react, he slammed his knife into the power conduit of one's armor, sending an electric jolt through its system. The alien convulsed and collapsed. The crowd erupted. Confusion and awe rippled through the stands. The Emperor's expression, once smug, darkened. The final warrior, larger and more cautious, circled him warily. You fight differently than others. Darius cracked his knuckles. You're finally catching on. The last warrior charged in, aiming for a grapple. Darius sidestepped but was clipped by an armored fist, pain shooting through his ribs. He gritted his teeth and retaliated with a lightning-fast strike to the alien's exposed side. The warrior staggered, and Darius pressed the advantage, striking with relentless precision until the giant collapsed to his knees. Breathing heavily, Darius stepped back and surveyed the fallen warriors. Silence filled the arena. The Emperor leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowed in disbelief. Darius turned his gaze upward, locking eyes with the Emperor. Is this the best you've got? He called, his voice carrying through the Colosseum. The silence shattered into an uproar. Some jeered, others cheered in disbelief. The Emperor's face twitched with restrained fury. Enough, the Emperor growled. Let's see how you fare against a true warrior. The gates groaned open once more, and a shadowed figure stepped onto the battlefield, taller, heavier, radiating an aura of absolute dominance. Lord Commander Zyrex Draal, the Emperor's personal champion, strode forward, his piercing red eyes locking onto Darius with predatory focus. Darius clenched his fists, feeling the ache of his wounds but refusing to show weakness. The real fight had just begun. Darius steadied his breathing, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the towering figure before him. Lord Commander Zyrex Draal exuded an aura of absolute authority, his dark armor pulsing with crimson energy lines that traced the contours of his massive frame. The Zythurian champion moved with unsettling grace for his size, each step deliberate, radiating menace. The crowd, once boisterous, now watched in tense anticipation. The air buzzed with an almost tangible weight, as if the collective will of the Empire demanded Darius' defeat. He could hear the murmurs, the whispered disbelief that a human had made it this far. Zyrex tilted his head, studying Darius with cold amusement. I admit you've exceeded expectations, he said, voice deep and resonant. But this ends now. Darius rolled his shoulders, feeling the ache from his previous fight. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. Without warning, Zyrex lunged, covering the distance between them in a blink. Darius barely had time to react, twisting to the side as a gauntlet fist shot past his head with bone-crushing force. The impact sent a shockwave through the ground, cracks spiderwebbing across the arena floor. Darius retaliated instantly, driving his knife toward Zyrex's exposed side. The blade met an unseen energy field, skidding harmlessly across his armor. A fraction of a second later, Zyrex's massive arm caught Darius in the chest, sending him sprawling across the arena. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain lanced through his ribs, but he pushed it aside, forcing himself to his feet. Zyrex was already advancing, his movements relentless. You rely on speed, Zyrex mused, his crimson eyes glowing beneath his helmet. But speed means nothing when you have nowhere to run. Darius smirked through the pain. Guess I'll have to improvise. Zyrex struck again, a flurry of precise, crushing blows. Darius dodged and countered, his movements fluid, precise, but the alien commander's speed and strength were overwhelming. Every dodge became narrower, every counter harder to land. The Zythurian's fighting style was a brutal blend of power and precision, honed over centuries of warfare. Darius shifted tactics, focusing on positioning rather than direct confrontation. He danced around Zyrex, forcing him to expend energy chasing him. The alien commander's frustration began to show in the tightening of his stance, the slight hesitation in his attacks. Running already? Zyrex taunted, his strikes growing more aggressive. Darius grinned. Nope, just thinking. With a sudden burst of speed, he feinted right, drawing Zyrex's attention, then pivoted sharply left, slashing his knife across an exposed joint in the commander's armor. Sparks flew as the blade bit deeper than before. Zyrex staggered, snarling in irritation. The crowd gasped. This was no fluke. Darius wasn't just surviving, he was analyzing, adapting. He pressed the attack, exploiting every micro-opening, testing weaknesses in Xyrex's armor. But the commander was no fool. He recalibrated quickly, switching tactics mid-fight. He lunged with unexpected speed, grabbing Darius by the arm and slamming him to the ground with crushing force. Dazed, Darius barely rolled away as Xyrex's boot came down where his head had been moments before. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself up, sweat dripping down his face. His ribs ached, his breath came ragged, but he wasn't out yet. "Impressive," Xyrex admitted, wiping a drop of dark fluid from the cut Darius had made. "Your kind has spirit. But spirit alone cannot defeat strength." Darius steadied himself, wiping blood from his lip. "Yeah? Strength didn't help your buddies much." Xyrex's expression darkened, and he attacked with renewed fury. Darius evaded the first few strikes but felt exhaustion creeping in. He needed a different approach. His eyes darted around the arena, noting the structural layout. The floor was reinforced with energy conduits, glowing faintly with residual power. A plan formed. Xyrex lunged again, and this time, Darius didn't dodge. Instead, he caught the alien's arm and redirected the momentum, using the force to hurl them both toward a nearby pillar. The impact sent a burst of sparks flying, temporarily disorienting Xyrex. Wasting no time, Darius dove for the exposed conduit and ripped a wire free, sparks dancing along its length. With a quick slash of his knife, he stripped the insulation and jammed it into Xyrex's armor joint. A surge of energy crackled through the alien commander's suit, causing his limbs to spasm momentarily. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs as the mighty Xyrex staggered, struggling to control his convulsing limbs. Darius didn't let up. He launched himself at the commander, landing a series of precise blows to weaken the armor's integrity. Each strike found its mark, denting the once impenetrable shell. Xyrex roared in anger, finally shaking off the electrical surge and backhanding Darius with brutal force. The human flew backward, skidding across the sand. Lying there, Darius fought the rising darkness at the edges of his vision. His body screamed in protest, but he forced himself up once more. He could see it, the cracks forming in Xyrex's confidence. The Emperor, high above, leaned forward, his expression no longer one of amusement but of cautious intrigue. Darius wiped sweat from his brow and cracked his knuckles. "Had enough, big guy?" Xyrex took a deep breath, his stance shifting to something more dangerous, more focused. "You fight well, human," he said, a grudging respect lacing his tone. "But I have not yet begun." The ground trembled as Xyrex activated his armor's full capabilities. The crimson veins along his body flared brightly, and a resonating hum filled the air. Darius braced himself. The trial was far from over. The air in the arena grew heavy with anticipation as Xyrex Drawl activated his armor's full capabilities. The crimson veins tracing his obsidian plating pulsed brighter, surging with raw energy. The sand beneath his feet trembled with each step as he advanced, his aura radiating an almost oppressive force. Darius wiped sweat from his brow, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling into his muscles. His chest ached, his limbs burned, but his mind remained sharp. He had pushed Xyrex further than anyone expected, but now the true test was upon him. He shifted his stance, eyes scanning every movement, every subtle shift in the alien's posture. "Impressive," Xyrex said, his voice amplified by the arena's speakers. "But all things have limits, including you." Darius rolled his neck, cracking the tension away. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you." Xyrex lunged with terrifying speed, his fist arcing through the air like a wrecking ball. Darius dodged at the last second, feeling the sheer force graze past him, sending a wave of sand flying. He countered with a quick strike to the alien's exposed joint, but this time Xyrex anticipated it, catching Darius by the wrist and twisting hard. Pain flared through his arm as he was lifted off the ground and hurled across the battlefield. He slammed into the arena wall with a bone-jarring impact, the wind knocked from his lungs. Stars danced in his vision as he struggled to rise, gritting his teeth against the pain. Xyrex approached, his steps slow and deliberate. "I can feel your bones breaking, human," he said, voice dripping with satisfaction. You should have surrendered. Darius coughed, tasting copper in his mouth. He forced himself to his feet, staggering slightly. Surrender's not really my style. The crowd murmured in disbelief. They had expected the fight to be over by now, yet the human stood again, defiant as ever. Xyrex's eyes narrowed, and with a growl, he launched another attack, swinging his massive blade in a brutal arc. Darius ducked low, feeling the air slice past him, and drove forward, planting a hard kick into Xyrex's knee. The alien staggered slightly, but before Darius could follow up, a backhand strike sent him sprawling again. Pain surged through his body, but his mind raced. Xyrex was stronger, faster, but he was predictable. Overconfidence blinded him. Darius needed to exploit that arrogance. Breathing heavily, he forced himself upright, shaking the dizziness away. His gaze fell on the damaged power conduits scattered around the arena. An idea sparked in his mind. He just needed an opening. Xyrex advanced, towering over him. Enough games? He snarled, raising his weapon for a final strike. Darius took a calculated step back, feigning exhaustion. Yeah, you're right. Time to end this. As Xyrex swung, Darius dropped to the ground, rolling to the side. The massive blade crashed into the ground, sending debris flying. In an instant, Darius seized a severed power conduit and jammed it against Xyrex's exposed armor joint. Electricity arced violently, crackling through the alien's frame. Xyrex roared, his body convulsing as the surge disrupted his suit's systems. Seizing the moment, Darius sprang to his feet and delivered a brutal series of blows, quick, precise strikes targeting weak points he had identified earlier. He slammed his elbow into Xyrex's neck joint, followed by a knee to the midsection. The once invincible warrior stumbled. The audience erupted, half in shock, half in awe. The Emperor, seated high above, leaned forward, eyes narrowed in disbelief. Xyrex growled in frustration, shaking off the effects of the shock. You're just delaying the inevitable, he snarled. Darius smirked. Maybe. Or maybe I just needed to remind you. He moved swiftly, exploiting Xyrex's slower reactions. That humans don't fight fair. With a final, calculated strike, Darius drove his knife deep into the exposed gap in Xyrex's side, twisting it sharply. The alien let out a choked gasp, his knees buckling under the weight of his failing systems. Darius stepped back, watching as Xyrex collapsed onto the arena floor, gasping for breath. The mighty champion of the Empire, brought down by a mere human. Silence engulfed the Colosseum. The weight of disbelief hung in the air. Then, a slow murmur rippled through the crowd, growing into an uproarious mix of cheers and outrage. Darius wiped his blade clean and turned his gaze toward the Emperor. So, what's next? Or are we done here? The Emperor's expression was a mask of fury, his golden eyes burning with barely contained rage. He rose from his throne, his voice cutting through the arena. This was unexpected. He gestured toward the fallen Xyrex. But not definitive. Darius exhaled sharply. Of course. There's always another test. The Emperor's lips curled into a thin smile. You have proven yourself resourceful. But power is not measured in tricks. You may have won the battle, human, but the war is far from over. Darius sheathed his knife, his eyes never leaving the Emperor. We'll see. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit, the weight of thousands of eyes following him. He knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had made its mark today, but the real fight was still to come. Darius walked through the colossal gates of the Imperial Colosseum, his breath steady despite the burning ache in his ribs. The murmurs of the crowd echoed behind him, a mix of disbelief and admiration. He could feel their eyes on his back, their expectations shifting, their certainty in Xytherian superiority shaken. He had done more than survive, he had proven humanity's resilience. Beyond the arena, the grand halls of the Imperial Palace stretched ahead, their polished obsidian walls reflecting the artificial light. A pair of Imperial guards flanked his path, their expressions unreadable beneath their helmets. Darius ignored them, focusing on what lay ahead. A sudden voice broke the silence. You walk as if you've won something human. Darius turned to see Zyrex draw leaning against a pillar, his armor dented and cracked from their battle. A thin line of dark fluid dripped from a gash along his side, but the commander's expression was one of reluctant respect rather than hostility. Darius met his gaze. Didn't I? Zyrex pushed off the wall, his towering form casting a long shadow. You fought well, but don't mistake today for victory. You earned survival, nothing more. His crimson eyes studied Darius carefully. Your kind is stubborn. I see that now. Darius folded his arms, exhaustion weighing on him. Stubbornness kept us alive when the universe thought we wouldn't last. That same stubbornness just took down your best. Zyrex's lips curled in something that might have been a smirk. Perhaps. But the Emperor doesn't take humiliation lightly. Darius glanced toward the towering golden doors leading to the imperial throne room. Let him stew. I didn't come here to make friends. Zyrex stepped closer, lowering his voice. No, you came to prove humanity's strength. But strength alone won't be enough if the Emperor decides Earth is a threat. Darius stiffened. The words carried a warning he couldn't ignore. Then maybe it's time he realized that threats can come from unexpected places. Before Zyrex could respond, the grand doors opened with a low rumble. A robed attendant motioned for Darius to step inside. With one last glance at Zyrex, he moved forward, entering the heart of the Zytherian Empire. The throne room was vast, lined with towering crystalline pillars that pulsed faintly with energy. At the center, seated upon an ornate throne of dark metal and glowing gemstones, the Emperor regarded Darius with a calculating expression. His golden robes shimmered under the artificial light, and his piercing gaze held the weight of centuries. You defied expectations today, the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You've entertained me, though I must admit. I had hoped to see you crushed beneath Zyrex's boot. Darius stood tall, his expression impassive. Disappointed? The Emperor's lips curled into a thin smile. Amused. He gestured to the side, where holographic projections of the fight flickered in the air. You fight with ingenuity. It is rare to see such adaptability in the lesser species. Darius suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. We're full of surprises. The Emperor leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. Indeed. And surprises can be dangerous. Your display today has sparked questions. He waved a hand, and a series of data streams filled the air, reports, analysis, footage of past human conflicts. Your kind has an unsettling tendency to turn the tide when least expected. Darius met the Emperor's gaze. That's what happens when you underestimate us. The chamber fell silent. Tension crackled in the air like a live wire. Darius knew he was treading dangerous ground, but he also knew weakness would only invite destruction. The Emperor's expression hardened. You speak boldly, Captain Kane. But words mean little in the grand scheme of things. He leaned back, considering him with an unreadable gaze. Perhaps humanity is more useful than I believed. Darius frowned. Useful? The Emperor gestured toward the vast star map projected across the chamber. The Empire has enemies, rebellious factions, opportunistic rivals. A species with your resourcefulness could be of service. Darius tensed. We're not mercenaries. The Emperor's smile remained. No. You're survivors. Survivors know when to choose the winning side. He let the words hang for a moment before continuing. The alternative is less appealing. Darius exhaled slowly, weighing his response. Humanity isn't looking to pick sides, Your Majesty. We're looking for respect. A seat at the table. The Emperor regarded him for a long moment. Respect is earned through power, Captain Kane. Today you have earned consideration. He gestured dismissively. For now. Darius inclined his head slightly, sensing the conversation was over. Then I guess I'll keep earning it. Turning on his heel, he walked out of the throne room, the weight of the Emperor's gaze burning into his back. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As he stepped back into the corridor, Zyrex was waiting. The commander studied him in silence before speaking. You may have survived today, human, but tomorrow brings new challenges. Darius smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. With that, he strode past the towering warrior, feeling the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon him. Humanity had made its stand today. Now they had to prepare for whatever came next.